I used to smile when my son Leo got scared. Not out loud, of course. Not in a mean way, just that quiet, grown up kind of amusement. You know the type. The kind you carry when you've lived long enough to know that the world is mostly safe, even when it feels dangerous. Monsters under the bed, shadows in the hallway, the feeling of someone watching you. I would chuckle quietly, reassure him, and carry on with life. Sure, sweetheart, there's no such thing as monsters. Shadows are just from the lamp. Someone watching you? Probably just someone walking by. But that day in late October, everything changed. I couldn't laugh anymore. I had always brushed off those fears, as if they were just part of childhood. But that day, Leo's fear wasn't the kind that came from imagination. It was real, and it gripped me in a way I never expected. We were at the library, the one downtown, near the coffee shop we liked. It was a simple trip. Books to borrow, pastries to eat, time to pretend that life was normal again. I had only recently returned to work after my husband Evan passed away, and everything felt like I was carrying a stack of broken glass just trying to get through the day. Leo and I spent the morning talking about his latest reading obsession and how he had finally convinced me to try a new pastry. It felt like a break from the heaviness of grief and routine. We were walking past the circulation desk, ready to head out, when Leo suddenly stopped. He didn't say anything at first, but I felt it. Something had shifted in him, something I couldn't ignore. "Mom," he said, his voice low, almost urgent. "Bathroom? Now." I didn't question it. There was something in his tone, a quiet control that made me stop in my tracks. It wasn't panic, but it wasn't something I could dismiss either. I followed him into the men's restroom, my instincts on edge, but still unaware of what was coming. We went to the furthest stall, and Leo locked the door behind us, his hands shaking slightly. I crouched down to his level, ready to ask what was going on, when he put his finger to his lips. "Don't move," he whispered, his eyes wide. "Look." I followed his gaze through the gap at the bottom of the stall door, my breath catching in my throat. Brown leather shoes. Polished. Expensive. They stopped right in front of our stall. A man's voice, smooth and calm, came through the crack. He was speaking into a phone. "Yeah. Woman and boy. About 10. Red hoodie. Backpack with a dinosaur patch." I froze. My heart stopped. The backpack. Leo's backpack. The one with the dinosaur patch that he had sewn himself only a week ago. My son squeezed my fingers once, hard. His grip was tight, and I knew right then that something was terribly wrong. He didn't look at me. He didn't need to. He was focused, every inch of him alert. He raised one finger to his lips, signaling for silence. My heart was pounding in my chest as I realized what was happening. The man wasn't just in the restroom. He was describing us. The shoes moved again, slow steps, then paused. The man was checking the stalls one by one. My brain raced to catch up. It didn't make sense. Why was a man describing a child in a bathroom stall? This wasn't some random person. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was deliberate. This was tracking. I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone, hands shaking as I started recording. I didn't know what was happening, but I knew one thing for sure. If it wasn't documented, it hadn't happened. "Stay where you are. Officers are en route," the 911 dispatcher said, her calm voice doing nothing to settle my nerves. I didn't know what to expect after that, but I didn't let myself panic. I focused on Leo, on the quiet pressure of his hand in mine. He didn't look at me, but I knew he was listening, his body completely still, every sense on alert. I held my breath, trying to make as little noise as possible. I couldn't stop the thoughts from racing through my head. What if the man knew we'd seen him? What if he was waiting for us to make a move? What if we didn't get out of here? The shoes moved again, this time towards the sink. I heard the faucet turn on, the water running, and a paper towel being pulled from the dispenser. Every little sound was amplified, each one making my heart beat faster. The seconds stretched on, seeming to last forever. I kept my phone low in my lap, still recording, still praying that this would all make sense later, that this would just be a weird misunderstanding, something we could laugh about when we got home. But I wasn't fooling myself. This was real. This man had been following us. He was looking for us. The same man Leo had described, the one with the phone, the one who knew about the backpack. "Please, please, please," I whispered to myself, clutching Leo's hand tighter. "Stay calm. Stay quiet." I repeated the words like a mantra, trying to hold it together, trying to focus on the here and now. We couldn't run yet. If we moved too soon, we'd give ourselves away. If we stayed hidden, though, maybe, just maybe, he wouldn't find us. The shoes paused again, and I stiffened. I wasn't sure whether I should risk peeking to see what was happening. Instead, I just watched the bottom of the door. My eyes locked on the shadow of those brown leather shoes, watching for any sign of movement. I didn't know how long we stayed there like that, in the thick, suffocating silence, just waiting for the next step, the next sound. But eventually, the shoes moved away from the stalls and toward the exit. My breath came out in a shaky exhale as I heard the restroom door open, then close again. For a moment, I thought I was imagining things. But no, there was no one left. We were alone. Still, I didn't feel safe. I couldn't just walk out into the open. My brain was too far ahead of my body, my mind already calculating escape routes, but my legs wouldn't move. Leo's grip on my hand was still firm, and I knew I couldn't make a move until I knew for sure the threat was gone. Then the phone rang. The sudden sound cut through the quiet like a lightning strike, and I flinched, startled. It was my 911 dispatcher. "Stay where you are," she said again, her voice like a calm anchor in the storm. "Officers are on the way. Are you safe to leave the restroom?" I checked the door one more time, still hearing nothing except the soft hum of the bathroom lights. "Yes," I whispered. "I think so." I wasn't ready to let my guard down, but I had no other choice. I helped Leo to his feet and slowly stood up, taking one last glance at the door. "We're leaving," I said softly, my voice just above a whisper. "Follow me, Leo. Stay close." We stepped out of the stall, moving like shadows. I could hear our footsteps on the tile, but I kept my pace steady, my mind hyper-focused on the exit. As we reached the door, I stopped and looked one last time. No sign of the man. Leo and I made our way quickly to the security desk, and my stomach tightened with the knowledge that this was far from over. It wasn't just a creepy encounter. This had been calculated, targeted, and I wasn't sure what was waiting for us next. We made it to the security desk in record time, but the moment we arrived, I felt the weight of everything crash down on me. The two librarians who had called security for us were already looking at us, confused, like they didn't fully grasp the seriousness of what had just happened. I glanced at Leo, who was staring at the ground, trying not to look at anyone, his little fingers still clutching mine so tight it hurt. He was doing his best to stay brave, but I could see the tension in his body, the way his shoulders were stiff, like he was still on high alert. I turned to the security guard behind the desk, trying to keep my voice steady. "We need help," I said, trying not to let my panic bleed through. "There's a man in the library. He was following us in the restroom. Describe my son's backpack. We're not sure where he went." I could feel my heart pounding, louder than the words I was speaking. The guard didn't immediately react the way I expected. He looked us up and down, probably assessing whether we were just another set of frantic shoppers or something more serious. His eyes narrowed, as if to process what we were saying. "Wait here," he said after a pause, not even offering to walk with us or make sure we were okay. He motioned to a small, cluttered office behind him. "I'll call mall security." I didn't want to wait. I wanted action. I wanted someone to move, to do something, and fast. But we were stuck there, feeling like we were in a holding pattern, waiting for someone to take charge of the situation. I glanced over at Leo again, and he finally met my eyes. His face was pale, and his mouth was pressed in a thin line. I wanted to pull him into my arms and never let go, but there was no time for that. A few minutes later, a mall security officer arrived, his polo shirt looking as stiff as his posture. He looked at us, then turned back to the guard, who had called him. "What's going on here?" The guard explained the situation, but the security officer's response was far from reassuring. "I'll check the cameras. But you two stay right here. We need to make sure this doesn't get out of hand." I didn't trust his confidence. There was something about his tone that felt like he was brushing us off, as if this was all part of the usual mall security protocol, something normal, nothing to get worked up over. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being dismissed. Leo tugged at my sleeve. "Mom, can we go?" he whispered. His voice broke just a little. "I don't want to stay here anymore." "I know, sweetie," I said softly, running my fingers through his hair, trying to soothe him. But we need to make sure we're safe. I promise we'll leave soon. The mall security officer eventually returned, and when he did, he had a small folder in his hand. My stomach dropped when I saw the contents, still shots from the cameras, the images of the man who had been following us. He was mid-40s, dressed sharply, and holding a small camera. He wasn't acting like someone just passing through the library. He was walking with purpose, his eyes scanning the area as though he knew exactly what he was looking for. He was calm. Too calm. Found him, the officer said. His voice was matter-of-fact, like this was just another day on the job. We've been tracking him through the building. He's been walking around for the past hour, blending in with the crowd. We're heading over now. I could feel a lump forming in my throat, a mix of fear and disbelief. My son had been right. This wasn't just a random encounter. This man had been hunting us. And I wasn't sure how much time we had left before things escalated even further. But we were running out of options, and I didn't want to risk anything more. "Mom?" Leo asked again, his voice small and unsure. I held him close, taking a deep breath. "We're going to be okay," I said, trying to convince myself just as much as him. "Everything's going to be fine." But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The moments that followed felt like they were happening to someone else. Leo and I were escorted by security down a narrow hall to a back office, where they had set up a small waiting area for us. The fluorescent lights above flickered intermittently, casting an unsettling hum over everything. I tried to keep calm, to put on a face for Leo, but inside, my stomach was a twisted knot of fear. What had started as an ordinary trip to the library had turned into something out of a nightmare. "Stay here," the officer said, his voice cold and impersonal, as if this was just another routine call. I barely nodded in response, and he walked off without another word. Leo clung to me like a lifeline, his small body stiff with tension. I could feel his heart beating erratically against my side, and I didn't blame him. I felt the same way. We sat in silence for a few minutes, the weight of the situation pressing down on us. I kept glancing at the door, as if expecting the man to appear in the hallway, his camera raised, watching us again. But he didn't come. Instead, the only sound was the rhythmic ticking of a clock somewhere nearby. Tick, tick, tick. I looked at Leo, who was staring at his sneakers, his mind clearly somewhere else. "Leo," I said softly, trying to break the silence. "Are you okay?" He didn't answer right away, but after a few seconds, he finally met my gaze. His eyes were wide, his face pale, and I could see the fear that still lingered behind them. "I don't like it, Mom," he whispered. "I don't like it here. I don't like that man." I felt my heart break a little. I had spent so much of my life reassuring him, telling him there was nothing to be afraid of, that he didn't need to worry. And now, here we were, both of us terrified. "I know, honey," I said, my voice shaky. "I know, but we're going to be okay. I promise." The words didn't feel real, though. How could I promise that when I wasn't sure what was coming next? A few more minutes passed before a second officer came in. His face was grim, and he had a folder with him. I could tell by the way he held it that it wasn't good news. "We've located the individual," he said, his voice flat. "He's being questioned now." My heart skipped a beat, and I felt a wave of relief wash over me, only to be replaced by the sickening realization of what had happened. The man hadn't just followed us for fun. He'd been tracking us, documenting us. He knew too much. He knew what we looked like, what Leo was wearing, what bag we were carrying. This wasn't a random encounter. This was intentional. "Who is he?" I asked, my voice low but sharp. "Why was he following us?" The officer paused before answering, his eyes flicking to the folder in his hands. "He's a private investigator," he said, as if that explained everything. "Hired by someone to observe you." The air in the room seemed to freeze. I felt the blood drain from my face as the words sunk in. A private investigator? Watching us? What kind of sick person would do that? "Who hired him?" I demanded, suddenly feeling the need to know everything. Who would do something like that? The officer hesitated again, his expression tightening. "We're still investigating, but we think it's someone you know." I swallowed hard, my mind racing. Someone I knew? My pulse was pounding in my ears as I tried to make sense of what he was saying. Who would want to spy on us? Who would want to put my son in danger? Before I could ask more questions, the officer stood up, the folder still in his hands. "We're going to take care of this," he said. "You just stay here. The situation is under control now." But nothing felt under control. Not anymore. The walls felt like they were closing in around me, the air thick with the weight of the unknown. And as the officer walked out, leaving us alone once again, I realized that this wasn't just about a man following us in a bathroom. This was about control, about someone wanting to invade our lives in a way I couldn't comprehend. Leo looked up at me, his eyes still wide, his face still pale. "Mom," he said quietly, "who would want to hurt us?" I didn't have an answer for him. And, deep down, I wasn't sure I could protect him from whatever was coming next. The next few hours felt like they moved in slow motion, each second stretching longer than the one before. The air in the security office was thick with tension, and every time the door opened, I half expected to see the man from the restroom standing there, his cool gaze fixed on us again. But he never came. Instead, the officers did their best to reassure me, though their words were empty, and their calm demeanor felt like a mask. Eventually, I was led to a back room where the investigation continued, and the officer who'd been questioning the private investigator sat with me and Leo. He was kind, in a way, but his eyes betrayed the heaviness of the situation. He kept glancing at the door, his fingers tapping on the table nervously, as though expecting something terrible to happen any second. I couldn't blame him. I felt the same way. After a while, I found myself lost in thought, the weight of everything pushing down on my chest. How had this happened? How had I not seen it coming? How could anyone, especially someone I trusted, put my son in danger like this? The questions spun in my head like a whirlwind, and I couldn't make sense of any of them. The officer spoke again, pulling me from my thoughts. "The man, Hartman," he said, his voice soft but firm. "He's been working as a private investigator for several years. He's done a lot of work in child custody cases, but this one's different." I looked at him, my stomach sinking even further. "Different how?" He hesitated, clearly trying to choose his words carefully. "It looks like he was hired by someone close to you. We're still confirming the details, but it seems he was hired to assess your fitness as a parent." I felt the blood drain from my face, and for a moment, the world seemed to tilt. My body went numb, and I had to grip the edge of the table to steady myself. "What?" I whispered, not sure I had heard him correctly. "Hired to assess your parenting," he repeated gently. "To gather evidence of neglect. It seems there's a concern about how you've been managing after your husband's passing." I couldn't breathe. The room spun around me, and all I could hear was the pounding of my own heart in my ears. My head swam, but I couldn't focus on anything except the words the officer had just said. Someone had hired a man to spy on me, to track my every move, to take pictures of me and Leo, my son, without us even knowing. The idea that someone could do this, could violate our lives so completely, made my stomach churn. Who would do this? Who would hire a man to tear apart my life like that? I didn't want to believe it, but deep down, I already knew. The answer hung in the air, thick and suffocating. My mind flashed to my mother-in-law, Judith, the subtle comments she'd made, the questions about how I was managing everything, how Leo was coping. I had dismissed them as concern, as the worries of a grandmother who was just trying to make sure we were okay. But now it felt like she had been building a case against me, like she had been looking for a reason to take my son away. The officer gave me a moment to process before he spoke again. "We're going to handle this, Mrs. Miller. We'll make sure this man doesn't get away with what he's done. We're also contacting CPS, just to be thorough." CPS. The words felt like a slap. I had always imagined that when social services got involved, it was because someone was really in trouble. That wasn't me. I wasn't perfect, but I was doing the best I could. But as I sat there, the weight of it all crashing down on me, I realized how vulnerable I was. How easy it would be for someone to twist things, to make it look like I wasn't enough. Leo squeezed my hand, his voice soft. "Mom, are we going home soon?" I looked at him, his innocent face so trusting, and for a moment I wanted to tell him everything would be okay. But I couldn't, because nothing about this was okay, and I had no idea what would happen next. Would we ever feel safe again? Would my family ever be the same? But one thing was clear. I wasn't going to let them take my son. Not without a fight. The following days felt like a blur of confusion and anger. I spent most of my time talking to lawyers, gathering the scattered pieces of information, trying to make sense of what had happened. The police assured me that they were doing everything they could, but it didn't feel like enough. Nothing felt like enough. There was a hole in my chest that nothing could fill, a sense of betrayal so deep I could barely breathe without it pressing on my ribs. I hadn't heard from Judith. I didn't know if she was avoiding me or if she was too busy playing her part in this twisted game to realize that she was about to lose everything. But I wasn't going to wait around to see what she'd do next. The damage was done. Leo and I had been pawns in a sick, manipulative scheme, and the person behind it all was someone I had trusted. That night, Leo and I sat at the kitchen table together, the quiet hum of the refrigerator the only sound between us. I had tried to cook dinner, but my mind was elsewhere. I could barely focus on the task at hand. It wasn't just the stress or the uncertainty, it was the weight of what I had to do next. I had to talk to Leo about what was going on. I knew I couldn't protect him from the truth forever, even if I wanted to. "Leo," I said, setting the spatula down and turning to face him, "I need to talk to you about something." He looked up at me, his expression cautious but curious. His eyes were still a little wide from the events at the library, and I could see the strain in his shoulders, as though he was still holding himself tight, not quite able to relax. "Are we going to be okay?" he asked, his voice small. The question broke my heart. I wanted to tell him everything was fine, that everything was back to normal, that we could go back to our routine and forget this nightmare. But I couldn't lie to him, not anymore. "No, Leo," I said, kneeling beside him. "We're not okay yet, but we will be." He looked at me, eyes searching my face for some kind of reassurance, and I tried my best to give him something, anything, that would make him feel safe again. "I don't understand, Mom," he said softly. "Why would Grandma Judith do this?" The question hit me harder than anything. Why? How could a mother do something like this to her own daughter-in-law? How could she go to such lengths to tear apart a family? I had no answers for Leo, none that made sense. The only thing I could say was the truth. "She wanted to take you away from me, Leo. She doesn't think I'm a good enough mom." Leo's eyes filled with confusion, and he shook his head. "But you are a good mom." I swallowed hard. "I know, sweetheart. I know I am. But she doesn't see it that way." We sat there in silence for a few moments, the weight of the conversation hanging in the air between us. Leo finally spoke again, his voice steady. "If she tries to take me away, will you fight her?" The question was simple, but it carried so much more weight than any child should ever have to carry. I looked at my son, his small hands folded on the table, his eyes searching for answers. "Of course I will, Leo," I said firmly. "I'll fight for you. I will always fight for you." He nodded, as though that was all he needed to hear. And in that moment, I realized something. No matter what happened next, no matter how far Judith was willing to go to control our lives, I had something she didn't: Leo's trust, his belief in me. And that would be enough. It had to be. The next morning, I called a meeting with a lawyer. I was done waiting, done hiding from the reality of the situation. I wasn't going to let Judith use me as a pawn in her twisted game. She had already underestimated me, and now I was going to make sure she knew that I wasn't going down without a fight. The days after the meeting with the lawyer passed in a blur of paperwork, meetings, and countless phone calls. I hadn't expected the weight of it all to feel so heavy. Every conversation, every decision, every single move felt like I was being watched. But there was something else now, too. The moment I had taken control, when I had finally chosen to stop waiting for someone else to handle it, I felt the first real glimmer of power I had in weeks. Leo and I settled into a new rhythm. Though it wasn't perfect. It couldn't be. But at least we were moving forward. My lawyer had advised me to focus on making sure Leo felt as safe as possible, emotionally and physically, and I threw myself into that. We spent the afternoons at the park, away from the constant reminders of what had happened. And slowly, Leo started to smile again. He started to laugh at the silly things like he used to before everything had gotten so complicated. But I knew we weren't out of the woods yet. Judith wasn't backing down. She was the type of person who would fight until she had nothing left to fight with. I had learned that much about her over the years, even if I hadn't fully understood it until now. and there was no way she was going to let go of the idea of controlling Leo's future so easily. One evening, about a week after the lawyer had sent the formal cease and desist letter to Judith, my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but something in my gut told me it wasn't good news. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the screen for a moment before I finally swiped to answer. Hello? Catherine? Judith's voice was smooth, calm, but there was an edge to it that I couldn't ignore. I think we need to talk. I stiffened, my heart racing, but I kept my voice steady. About what? About Leo, she said, and I could practically hear her smiling through the phone. About what's best for him. I took a deep breath. Don't even think about it, Judith. I know what you're doing, and it's not going to work. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and when she finally spoke, her voice was laced with something darker. You think you can protect him from me? You think you can keep him from having a better life? I'm the only one who truly understands what's best for him. I felt a cold rush of anger flood through me, but I didn't let it show. You don't get to decide that. I'm his mother, not you. She laughed, but there was no warmth in it. We'll see about that, won't we? You can keep playing this game, but don't forget, Catherine, I have resources. I have influence. You've underestimated me before. Her words were like a slap to the face, but I refused to let her see how much they stung. You can't take him from me, Judith. No matter what you do, you'll never be able to break us apart. There was a long silence, and for a moment I thought she had hung up. But then she spoke again, her voice low and dangerous. You think this is just about Leo, don't you? She said. It's not. It's about you, Catherine, about your weaknesses, about how easy you are to manipulate. I didn't respond right away. Part of me wanted to scream, to lash out, to tell her exactly how I felt, but I didn't. Instead, I said the only thing that mattered. I'm done with your games. You'll never have control over me again. There was a click on the other end of the line, and then the silence told me everything I needed to know. Judith was done for now. But I knew this wasn't the end of it. The battle was far from over. I looked over at Leo, who was sitting at the kitchen table, working on his homework, completely unaware of the conversation I had just had, and I realized that it didn't matter what Judith did. As long as I had Leo by my side, I would never stop fighting for him. Not now. Not ever. We weren't just surviving anymore. We were living, and we would keep living, no matter what she threw at us, because nothing was stronger than a mother's love. The days that followed were a blur of emotions, each one more intense than the last. I had no idea how to navigate the world I found myself in now. The world where trust had been shattered, where family no longer felt like a safe haven, and where the only thing I could rely on was the bond between Leo and me. It was the only thing that kept me grounded. But even that felt fragile sometimes, like something I was constantly on the verge of breaking. Leo was quieter now. His smile wasn't as frequent as it used to be, and I could tell he was still processing everything that had happened. He didn't ask many questions, but I could see the worry in his eyes, the same worry that was in my heart. What did all of this mean for him? For us? Would things ever feel normal again? I kept telling him it would, that things would get better. But deep down, I wasn't so sure. The situation with Judith had escalated quickly. Every time I thought we had reached a resolution, something else would happen. Another letter, another phone call, another threat. She was relentless, and it felt like the more I fought back, the more she came at me with everything she had. It was like she thought she could wear me down, break me into submission. One morning, a little over 2 weeks after the phone call with Judith, I woke up to an email notification on my phone. It was from my lawyer. My heart sank when I saw the subject line, "Urgent legal action required." I quickly opened it, my fingers trembling. The email contained a motion for custody. Judith had filed for full custody of Leo. She was using the investigators' reports as her evidence, claiming that I wasn't fit to be his mother. She said I was overworked, emotionally unstable, and unable to properly care for him. The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. It felt like a betrayal, like everything I had worked for, everything I had fought for, was being ripped away from me. I sat there for a long moment, staring at the screen, trying to process what this meant. She wasn't just trying to get Leo away from me. She was trying to destroy everything we had built together. She was attacking me where it hurt the most, my ability to be a mother. But something inside me snapped. I wasn't going to let her win. Not this time. I had already lost too much. David, the life I had imagined for us, the comfort of believing my family was untouchable. But I still had Leo, and I would fight for him with everything I had. I called my lawyer immediately, my voice shaking but determined. "We're not letting her do this," I said, my words coming out in a rush. "We're going to fight back, whatever it takes." The lawyer reassured me that we would file a response and do everything we could to challenge Judith's claims. But there was a sense of dread that settled in my chest. The battle had only just begun. I wasn't sure what the outcome would be, but I knew that I couldn't let fear dictate my actions anymore. I spent the rest of the day gathering everything I needed. I pulled out old photos, Leo's schoolwork, medical records, anything that could show that I was a good mother. I wasn't going to let Judith make me feel small. I wasn't going to let her tear our family apart. As I was sorting through the papers, Leo came into the room. He stood there for a moment, watching me, and then asked quietly, "What's happening, Mom?" I looked at him, trying to keep my voice steady. "We have to go to court, Leo. Grandma Judith wants to take you away from me, but I won't let her. I promise you, I won't let her." Leo didn't say anything, but I could see the uncertainty in his eyes. I reached out to him, pulling him close, and whispered, "You're safe with me, always." And in that moment, I realized that no matter what happened, we had each other, and that was enough. Life can throw unexpected challenges your way, and sometimes the people you trust most may surprise you in the worst way. But remember, your strength is not defined by the obstacles you face, but by how you rise from them. Trust your instincts, fight for what matters, and never underestimate the power of a mother's love. So keep pushing forward, because even in the darkest moments, there's always a way through. And hey, if this story resonated with you, or if you just like dramatic family drama, make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment. You know you want to.